So this is the talk for today. It wasn't Friday, but now it's this talk today because we had some exchange in the schedule. So here I am. So what we're going to talk about today is how we can have an improved feedback loop in a DevOps pipeline. How we can reuse patterns you know, and how we can have a consistent experience with low ceremony and hopefully a joyful experience. So who's standing here? My name is Mattias Karlsson. I'm a partner and senior architect at a company called VCOM here in Gothenburg. I'm also a Microsoft Azure MVP. I'm also a Microsoft Developer Technologies MVP. I'm also on the .NET Foundation Board of Directors. I'm fairly active in open source, which is on the board of .NET Foundation, but also as a member with one of my projects, which I will show today. But least not least, I'm also a husband of one and father of two, which is important. So if we're going to go through the experience with GitHub Actions, it's usually like we want something like, it's an improvement over what we used to have. It's more maintainable because you have this YAML file. It's easier to reuse because we have something we can reuse between things. It's not discoverable because it's more a text language than it is a programming language. And it's a high barrier entry because the discoverability, and it's hard to know the syntax for each task and things like that. The workflow is usually you edit that file, the YAML file that we read. You save it, you commit and push, and you wait. You go grab some coffee and wait some more, and you repeat. And that's usually like the DevOps process when you can't run the things locally. So what I'm going to demonstrate in this talk is an experience where we can make things more discoverable, reusable, maintainable, and the workflow, always similar, is we will edit text files. We will save them, but we will run them locally first. And then we'll commit and push, we'll wait, grab some coffee, and repeat. So it's just, we will insert one point in the workflow. So what is Cake? It's a cross-platform, and by cross-platform, I mean it runs on Mac, it runs on Linux, it runs on Windows. It's cross-environment, which is it will run locally, it will run on-premise, it will run on your virtual machine, in your container, anywhere you can run .NET, it will run. And it's cross-service, so if it's Azure DevOps, GitHub Actions, or if you're on TeamCity, AppWare, whatever, it will run there too. It's open source, which means you can improve it if you want, you can submit feedback, bug reports, and you can also look like what it's doing. It's open for all to collaborate. And foremost, it's a build orchestration framework. And it's either a C# DSL with a scripting mode or a console application, essentially, if I simplify it. So a normal .NET build process usually is we will restore something. We will restore some NuGet packages, or even if like in Node, we will restore some npm packages. We will build that to something. I don't all do it, but we can also test that code to see that it actually does what we want it to do. Then we'll package that into some kind of artifact, say a NuGet package, or if we do a zip file to deploy a website or something like that. And then we publish that to some either NuGet artifact repository, or we push it to some Azure website or whatever. So that's a very common workflow that I will try to mimic in this talk. So I will use a .NET solution to demonstrate this, which is already pre-made. It will look something like this. It will have a solution file, which most of .NET developers have seen. It will have a common assembly library that's reused between the projects. It will have a test project, and it will have a tool project, which essentially is a .NET tool that's packaged a console application. So that's the main part. So how do we obtain Cake? So Cake can be obtained either from NuGet as the Cake tool, which is a scripting tool, or Cake frosting, which is if you want the console application experience. Today I will go through the Cake tool, the scripting experience. The difference is that if you want the full, like if you have some really complex, then you can use full Visual Studio, you can use Orido or whatever, and have that experience. The scripting experience is best in Visual Studio Code, which has IntelliSense stuff like that. But it's more, if you think like the new console templates, you start with nothing and you can have something really, everything baked in. So that's what I will demonstrate today. The scripting experience is also available on Docker Hub, so you can have ready-made images with .NET and Cake on, so you can base your own images or build images on. So I will demonstrate my preferred way of obtaining Cake. And we can go to the console. So this is the sample project I just shown. It's just a .NET project, so we can go like .NET Restore if you want to restore it to see this is there. Cake is distributed through NuGet as a .NET Global tool. To install a .NET Global tool, you can either install it globally on your machine, but the preferred way is to create a tool manifest, which you version with your repository. That means that each time you build your repository on a CI system or locally or a developer, they will use the same version that you did. So you use the .NET new command, and tool-manifest. That will create a local file which is used to install version these tools, and then you can do clear .NET and this Cake tool. And now I can do .NET Cake, and it's installed. I guess it's really nice cake. We like cake pastries. So you can see you get that nice, it's installed. So what we just did is, the first time we need the tool manifest. That manifest you commit to your repository and you keep with your code. You then do install the tool. But the next time, like if your colleague checked out your code, they will just do .NET Tool Restore in your repository, and it will fetch all tools that are in the right version. So how do we get started like with a new Cake file? Well, we can start with code. And wait for code to start. Perfect. And the convention is to have, I will delete that, a build.cake file. So that's the default. You can call your cake file whatever you want, but if you don't give it any arguments, it's a build.cake file it will run from. And if you have the Cake extension installed for Visual Studio Code, you can switch to say that this is a Cake file, and then you will get IntelliSense for it. So this is very similar to if you've seen the new .NET templates. You can just do say hello for someone. And already here you see it's the difference from YAML. You get IntelliSense, you get a compiled language. So if we now when we have that Cake file, the .NET Cake, it hopefully should say hello. Perfect. So now we have the file new cake. Nothing more to it. You have something you can commit, something you can execute, and start with that. So it's low ceremony to get started. So let's start with how can I use it? This is my DevOps workflow. So Cake has notion of the items you do in your build is called tasks. So if we're gonna like mimic the thing we talked about before, we want to have one task that will restore. We will have one task that does the build. We will have a task that does the testing. Oh, let's say that. Say we want to pack the results. And publish. So to help us do something like, just like previously I can easily in the command line do .NET restore, for example. That will actually, we have a similar thing in Cake. So we have, to say that this task does something, you can add a delegate called does. And here we have some nice, so say to .NET Restore, it's called a command called .NET Restore. And here we have, let's try source. And we say we want to, just to test this, we have something called run target. So let's run the restore. So we go over here, do our, and if it breaks, it only proves my point that this is a compiled language that will check my errors. It actually executes the restore. And the similar thing, like, well, if we want to build, we add, I'm lazy, so I will copy paste. But we'll add, instead of restore, I don't know if anyone can guess, but we have a .NET build. And here is one nice thing, like we have something called a dependency graph of how we want to execute things. So we have a syntax here called is dependent on, and I can say, well, before we build, we need to restore. And we also have nice helpers. So I want to be able to pass an argument to say, well, which task should I invoke? So declare a variable, and we have an argument alias. So say target, for example, and we should say, we can say that the default is the package, for example. Then we can use this as variables, and that's something that's really hard in many other languages. So target. So if I execute now, yeah, and that's kind of good because I had a typo, and it will fail locally before I go to the other thing. So I get instant feedback. As I said, it proves my point. I get less coffee, but a better stomach. So if we correct our error, recompile. Oh, what? Did we have a package? No, because I called it pack. And we can do the same thing. Well, to have it execute, after build, we want to test. Well, we can't test if we haven't built. So we can just add that scenario. We don't want to package if we haven't tested. And we don't want to publish if we haven't packaged. So let's pull down with. So if we run now, it starts, it will restore. If we build, it won't test because we haven't set it to test anymore. But one thing we note here is the source for restore and build is in two places. And if it's something developers don't like is to repeat themselves. So what if we could share build state some way? Well, Cake has something called a life cycle, so we can have different hook into both before the graph executes and after. So we have a setup and a teardown. The setup will run before everything, and the teardown will run regardless as after. So we can start with adding a setup. And wouldn't it be nice if we could do things like, well, have a record. And one nice thing about, if you can type, by Cake is that we actually have all aren't just strings. So our source is a file path or directory path. We can have a directory path called source. We can, in our setup, return a new it's nice with intelligence. Yes, context. So we can still instead make this a generic. And then we can get what's nice. A property we can share. So let's copy paste that. So let's get our test going to, and that is, I don't know if anyone can guess it, but it's not a test. Kind of makes sense. And we have our package. So even if I'm factoring it, I can still get it pretty correct. And this will work. It will execute, but it will also do, or it won't work. Kind of nice with compiler errors. Perfect. So but we don't want to, like, after we're restored, we don't want to restore again. So all the aliases, which is what we call here, have typed settings, strongly typed settings. So we can do, for restore, we can do things if we want to change the source feed, or we have some other common things. But it's probably more important with the build. Because then we can have nice properties like no restore. And if we go to the test, we can both stop the build and restore because we already done it in nice type way. A common way can be like, well, we have a version, and I'll fake a version, but let's see. So say we have a version. We can have nice properties if we want, because it's C#. So we can use, let's say to MS build that we want to let's go to the right object. We also have support for MS build. This is .NET, so we also have version. And that gives us something to reuse, like let's use the same variable for MS build settings. It's got to let's see if it's picky. I haven't done it right. Yeah, perfect. You need to have the code in the right place. There. Perfect. We need a public property. So, and the same for, okay, just copy paste. So we're gone. For the important part, let's steal this one. We pass RM version first, so we Let's do an amazing version. Perfect. Do the same for steal the for pack. And mysteriously the pack is called pack. Perfect. So now if we run this, line 59. See. Oh, that's just me. Copy it wrong. Vad
händer om du kör ett task i taget?
Now we can see I had to reinstall code here, so but we can do that. Which is, let's do a quick debug, or I can just retype it. I think I see there. So go over to restore. Yeah, it works. So that's some. And this is something which is hard in the. It's just me having a typo somewhere, but in a YAML file to run it step by step. Oh, that works. That works. So probably always on the last line. Yep, cool. So then we have a working pipeline, and if we say, well, we want to place these artifacts for something. So currently we will have in our when we pack, we will have a NuGet package somewhere in the bin folder. But of course, we want to have a common artifacts folder. So let's go perfect. And we want to ensure that that exists. So we can add, I want it to be no state in it. And we need to send it here. So let's do a folder called artifacts, where we will place artifacts. And I think there's so many times the main thing in debugging the pipeline has been what path is used on the CI. This way I will know it's used the same path. Well, I don't want to use that. So you can just for a package task say and we can use the same, say, so we have all kinds of built-in aliases to, for example, clean directory. And we want to run that before, so we can just if we look now, we'll have 2 NuGet packages with our nice versioning in one place known. And one thing that, like in this case, we want to publish, say I want to publish my artifacts to GitHub artifacts. Well, like is GitHub as an artifact there. I can't test it locally, but I can get the logic for it tested locally. So let's see if we do so I don't factoring it this time. Interesting. Let's do perfect. So we have a sense of build providers. So let's see for GitHub Actions. We have GitHub Actions. You can do different commands. We have environments. You can check what kind of I'm on a pull request, what's a home directory, what's a runtime, what triggered this. All this is wrapped for you ready in type classes. But we also have commands. And we can do things like, well, upload artifact. And it takes a file path or a directory path. And at this time we have a directory path with artifacts. So let's say data and do facts, and let's call it Swetugg for artifact. And something we often forget, this is nothing, so let's await it. So we don't. So you can do full C#. We have records from the latest C#. We have asynchronous wait and everything. And I can try this locally. So let's do. And I can see that my whole pipeline is working with everything, but it will probably fail because there's no GitHub Actions agent on this web. But I can see it found the artifact, it tries to upload it, all that I can debug and test before. And it fails now because, well, there's no GitHub Action runtime token. So now we've done all this locally, let's try it in the cloud. And as I don't want to type YAML, I will prefetch a YAML I've already written, because I won't get that right the first time. And what is that YAML? Well, it's essentially, it will trigger on the main develop and hotfix branch. It will run on Windows latest, Ubuntu latest. It will check out the code, it will install the .NET SDK I've defined in my repository, and it will run the script. So if we go over to GitHub now, you see this is the repository I created 2 hours ago when I created this presentation. We'll see there's no actions. So we're doing this live. We have done all our development locally, tested everything, and we will see what happens. And as you know, we never get the build on CI right the first time. And so now we go grab coffee and do that thing, the dance. We can see that it has started the CI on 3 operating systems. It runs the same build script, the same definition. You have written it in not like you don't have to choose between PowerShell or Bash or whatever or different variants. It's C# that the developers already know. You can use the full that kind. And this will fail because I missed the task. So one thing you can do in a Cake script is you can have tasks that are just for, like I don't want to, each time I add something to my build pipeline in GitHub Actions, I don't want to add dependencies for that or whatever. I want to have one defined. So let's have a task called and we should call GitHub Actions. And it should be dependent on publish. And this means that I can change everything now. I will never need to touch my YAML file again because I can change the flow. So GitHub Actions can do something else. So we can just push that and hope that it works. And if I were another developer on the team, so let's see, the other developer is on a Linux machine or something like that. He should be able just to be able to take the same code and clone it out and build this on his machine. And to use this, I will use the thing that Jakob talked about in the morning. I will use GitHub Codespaces. And GitHub Codespaces essentially will give you a VM in the cloud with your that you can use. But essentially, you get the Linux machine. So here we see I haven't pulled down the changes, so this was something I created earlier. But a developer so this is untouched without the cake file, will just do, I'll pull down the changes. Let's see. So now if I pull down the changes that are my developer on, and then I will do a .NET tool restore. I will do a .NET cake on his machine, and it will execute the exact same workflow on a Linux machine that I just did on my Mac. Let's see how our CI is doing. Oh, that was wrong. We actually had success now. So now all 3 builds succeeded when we call the right task. And down here, we can see our Swetugg artifact. We only see one, but we can also do things like in this, wouldn't it be nice if we can distinguish between the Linux build and the other build? So we can do that on our brand new machine to be fun. So this is on our colleague's machine, which uses start mode like God intended it. And he can, we run on different operating systems, so I would like to use something nice like, on Mac, it should be called Mac, or on Linux, it should be called Linux, the artifact. So let's do some nice C# string interpolation. We have that's special key. Oh, let's turn on IntelliSense. So here we have things like the environment. So let's say the platform family. And this can also get us boolean. It's like, this task should only run on Linux. This task should only run on Windows. And we can send off to CI. So I will just YOL that again. And we can go back to the slides and we can see if it worked. Let's see. Yeah, perfect. So an idea where we can see .NET Restore would just look like .NET Restore in command. If we do things like build, .NET Build would look in cake like this, .NET Build. .NET Test would look something like this, .NET Test. And package would look something like test. And we had output directory. And that's a typed path, but also things like we can share state between the tasks. We only define them in one place. And something of the artifact will look something like this and For us, it will look something like we get a command. But we get full control, and that's something that's really hard to do in other CIs, that we can name the artifact whatever we want. We can have conventions like if you have a matrix, I build this on Windows x86, I build this on the Windows whatever, you can have a matrix of things and have those artifacts. So if we check, it's still building. So let's go back to the slide. So as I said, Cake is extensible. You can extend it via add-ins. Add-ins are NuGet packages. So essentially, you can pull down a .NET assembly from NuGet, and you can do any NuGet package live, but also add-ins are essentially NuGet packages that are Cake-aware. They can extend the DSL with new commands. There are scripts. You can actually package your scripts and reuse them. There's modules which you can replace the internals for Cake, like if you want to change the logging or something like that. And there's pre-processed directives. So you can have an add-in directive to fetch from NuGet. You can have a load directive to fetch a script from either locally or NuGet. You can have a module directive to fetch it locally or from NuGet. And we have R, which means you can reference assembly direct by file name. And that if so you want to test, you do an integration test of something you just built or something like that, you can use that. And there's a few more. The add-in looks like this. You specify the package name and the package. You can also specify the source in that if you want. And you pin the version, which is good matter. You can reference scripts like this, either do the path and have it reusable within your repository, or you can package scripts together and reuse them like this. You can modules look like this. It's a NuGet package. It has a naming convention, and it will extend. And that can be something like extend the logging, change how the task graph work, or things like that. And the reference is like this, like I want to reference a DLL of something I just built or something like that. And then you can actually load the thing you built in an integration script or something like that. So let's see how it went for the build. This was the grab coffee moment. So if we refresh, we now have Swetugg Linux, Swetugg OS X, and Swetugg Windows from the same build. And so the best way to, I think, to obtain this is that you can have your tool manifest, you have something versioned, you can test it before, you can get instant feedback. If you're like me, well, like if you type wrong and everything, you will get feedback on it. I showed the scripting part now. We have the frosting part, which is essentially a console application instead. Then you get full Visual Studio support. The recommended environment is VS Code, which we have an extension for to get all this. The extension also brings things like a command palette. You can get all these add-in directives and everything from just choose the NuGet package, and it will insert the code needed to do that package. It also has run tasks. You can I just want to run this task, and it will, based on convention, execute that task. So all the code is up, and the presentation is up there. The important part is cakebuild.net. There you will find everything. Our documentation is there, how we can get started, and also linked to our GitHub repository. So that was what I had. Questions? Chip? Yeah, so good things like so. The extensions are there are several thousands of command like aliases built into Cake, but also the add-ins part. So they are like for Grunt npm. There's actually NuGet packages to extend just that. So you get npm install, npm run, and things like that. Built in is loads of things like Wix is built in. There's built in for MS Build, .NET, .NET Test, NuGet. There's built-in for many build providers like Azure DevOps, AppWayer, TeamCity, and all things like not only upload artifacts, but can also be setting build outputs, uploading test results, things that are built in. So either like if it isn't built in, usually someone has done it. So we have around 300 extensions at the moment on NuGet.org for different things. And it can be things like running an Android emulator or running whatever it is, but it doesn't make sense to get in the box, but everyone won't use it. So that's community maintained. So we have a cake contrib org on GitHub, which all has a lot of, but you will find all on our cake build.net site. So we document even the community extensions there, so you can find how they're executed. Any more questions? Perfect. Then thank you.